So, I guess most of you have already encountered them quite a few times during your early days in World of Tanks. And I think most of you, including me, do not particularly have a lot of respect for them. And of course I'm talking about stat padders, aka seal clubbers. And for the ones of you who still have no clue what stat padders actually are, a stat padder is basically a player that already owns high tier tanks and is already reasonably skilled at World of Tanks, but instead of continuing their way up to tier 10 and actually learning to play high tier battles, they stick around the tier 3 to 6 and just absolutely dominate the new players who have no other option other than playing low tier, since they're obviously still starting World of Tanks and still learning the basics. And seal clubbers do this mainly for one reason, and that is to increase their WN8, since apparently a random number and a random color is very important for them. And also, in order to do this, they tend to always use the same low tier vehicles, since some low tier tanks are actually made for stat padding. But what are those tanks? Well, if you're wondering just that, then you've clicked on the right video, because in today's top 5 video, we're gonna be counting down the top 5 most OP stat padding / seal clubbing tanks in World of Tanks. So after watching this video, you exactly know what tanks you should try to avoid or try to focus down if you're still rather new to World of Tanks, or which tanks you want to play if you want to commit the sin of becoming a seal clubber yourself. And also, the fact that I'm making this video is because you guys asked for it. So no, I do not support seal clubbing in any way. I'm just a messenger. I'm just giving you the top 5 list most of you wanted to see. And as always, this video is mainly based on my personal opinion and experience with playing these vehicles. So please don't crucify me in the comment section for forgetting a tank that you would have picked. So for now, with all that out of the way, let's dive straight into the list. So, to kick things right off, at the number 5 position, we have the Panzer 1C. So, most of you veterans among my channel probably recognize this tank as the tank that started it all. But this tank did not only start my YouTube channel. No, it also started a lot of stat padding careers, since simply playing this thing when grinding your way to the Leopard is just absolute fun, and it almost kinda teases you to keep it for seal clubbing purposes, since the Panzer 1C is the shared fastest tank in the entire game, with a top speed of 79 kilometers per hour. But that's not all. The Panzer 1C also is pretty damn well armored for its tier, since it can reliably mount most lower tiered shells and even some shells of equal tiered opponents quite reliably, if you angle it in a smart way from time to time. And combine that with a devastating machine gun that might lack some penetration, but of course the massive damage output per clip for its tier more than makes up for it. So overall, the Panzer 1C has it all. It's got speed, high damage output and even some armor. All in all, it's the perfect tier 3 seal clubbing tank, and if it wasn't for its relatively low tier, it would have even made it to a higher spot on this list. But even as a tier 3 seal club machine, it's still a well-worthy number 5 spot on this list. So now we're done with that speed demon, let's quickly move on to the number 4 spot, where we have the second German entry on this list. It's of course no other than the Panzer 4H. So moving to the German mediums and stepping up a couple tiers, we have this tier 5 German stat padding machine. And you can more than safely say machine with a capital M, since this thing has probably one of the most devastating guns in whole tier 5. Since it has a 105mm howitzer gun that is well capable of one-shotting every lower tier and even some equal tiered opponents. Yeah, so what? The M4 Sherman got the same kind of gun. KV-1 got the same kind of gun, so why would the Panzer 4H be any better than those tanks? Well, that, my friends, has to do with the actual tank the gun is mounted on. Since, yeah, fair enough, you might say the M4 Sherman has the same gun, but does it perform the same way as well? I bet you didn't think about that, right? Since if you compare the Panzer 4H and the M4 Sherman side by side, you can see that the Panzer 4H has way better DPM, better accuracy, better hull armor, is more mobile and has those very convenient anti-HE shields on the turret and on its sides to massively reduce the chance that it gets one-shotted by other derp guns. Well, okay, you win this one, Lucky, but there is no way you can convince me that the Panzer 4H is better than the almighty Russian, totally non-biased KV-1. Well, you might want to take that back, since fair enough, the KV-1 has overall better armor except for the front. hole. But again, the DPM is way worse than the Panzer IV-H, and I guess I don't really need to explain you that the Panzer IV-H is much more mobile as well. And that is exactly what the typical stat pattern is looking for, since they want to do as much damage as possible, as fast as possible, and they want to be as flexible as possible to bump up their WN8 also as fast as possible. And yes, even though there are other options for this type of devastating gun at tier 5, but as I showed you guys, the Panzer IV-H simply is the most effective one among those. And that's why the Panzer IV-H rightfully claims the number 4 spot on this list. So then, moving on to the number 3 spot on this list, where we have the American stat padding dream, the T67. So yeah, the Panzer IV-H came pretty close to being the best tier 5 steel clubbing tank, but even though it has the same damage output and flexibility, it's still missing one very important feature, and that is reliability. Since sure, one-shotting tanks with such a big derp gun is fun and all, but it's not all roses and sunshine, since you're also gonna experience a lot of missing and non-penetrating shots, because 0.53 accuracy is only gonna allow you to hit your targets at a very close range, and the limited HE penetration might change your gun into a slot machine quite quickly. But if you don't want any of that and you just want something that does require a little bit more skill to play it well, but completely dominates the tier 5 battlefield when played right, then look no further than the T67. Since it takes everything that the Panzer IV-H already had, which was great damage output and flexibility, and simply multiplies that by 2 and also adds a reliability factor to it. Since the T67 might use a smaller caliber 67mm gun, but that gun, even though it has worse DPM, but you gotta consider that the Panzer IV-H HE DPM isn't really realistic, it is truly a devastating tank destroyer gun, with a whopping 128mm of penetration on its standard rounds and 177mm of penetration on its premium rounds, which allows it to, unlike the Panzer IV-H, stand its ground quite well even if it manages to get himself at a bottom tier matchup. And combine that with insane speed and a great overall camo value, and you've got yourself pretty much the best stat padding tank at tier 5. So if you don't mind the relatively big skill cap it has, then 100% go for the T67 and you won't be disappointed. But if you think the playstyle of the T67 might be still a little too tricky for you, then I guess you would be much better off with the more noob friendly Panzer IV-H. But all in all, we are talking about the real hardcore steel clubbers here, and for those players the T67 is the perfect option at tier 5 and a well deserved number 3 spot on this list. So then, moving up a tier and moving on to the number 2 spot on this list, where we have the Cromwell B. So yeah, the Cromwell B, who doesn't know this living British legend? It's well known for actually being one of the best tier 6 medium tanks in the game. But why is that actually? Well, it's basically a T67 at tier 6, but as a medium, since it's a little faster than the T67 with a top speed of 64 km per hour, and even though the T67 has a better horsepower to ton ratio, the Cromwell makes up for that with the way better terrain resistance it has. So they are both as fast, and also gun-wise both tanks are very similar, since the Cromwell uses a very similar 75mm gun with about the same stats as the T67's gun, except the Cromwell has quite a bit better accuracy. But wait, up until now the T67 and the Cromwell have been roughly the same, but why is the Cromwell listed higher then? Well, that has to do with the Cromwell eliminating some weaknesses that the T67 still has. Since unlike the T67's very slow traversing turret, the Cromwell is a medium and not a tank destroyer, so it actually gets a turret that rotates at a medium-like speed as well, which makes the Cromwell overall way more flexible already. And also armor-wise the Cromwell beats the T67, because fair enough the Cromwell's armor isn't that great as well, but it is actually a little thicker than the T67's armor, therefore making it more resistant against HE pens, which is a very nice plus as well. So overall the Cromwell looks like the perfect seal clubbing package at tier 6. It's fast, it's flexible, and it has a reliable gun with a nice damage output. So how can a tank possibly be better than this? Well, just wait and see until we get to the number 1 spot on this list. But to round things up, the Cromwell is indeed almost the perfect tier 6 stat padding tank. So therefore it's not quite number 1, but it definitely rightfully claims the number 2 spot on this list. So now guys, the moment you probably all have been waiting for, the number 1 spot and the best stat padding tank in World of Tanks is the Type 64. Okay, so before I start, it was a very hard choice for me to choose in between the Cromwell and the Type 64 for the number 1 spot, since both tanks play almost identical and also have almost identical stats, because the Cromwell has a slightly better gun with a bit more alpha damage and better APCR penetration but a little worse DPM, and the Type 64 is obviously quite a bit faster with a top speed of 74 km per hour and also accelerates faster, since it's obviously a light tank. But then for the Cromwell, it has that more HE pen resistant armor, so I guess you can now even more imagine how hard this choice actually was for me. But eventually I did go with the Type 64 as the number 1 spot because of 2 main reasons. With firstly being the gun depression, since the Cromwell has an already very decent 8 degrees of gun depression, but the Type 64 just beats that with its even better 10 degrees of gun depression, which makes the Type 64 even more flexible and suitable for hill combat. And it allows the Type 64 to hide a lot more of its tank while peeking hills, reducing the chance of getting hit. And the second reason I picked the Type 64 over the Cromwell is the fact that it is a light tank. And if you didn't know already, a light tank's camo rating doesn't drop if the tank starts moving, while medium tanks don't have this perk unfortunately, which means that the Type 64 can be played way more stealthy and you won't be spotted as often while relocating, which allows you to ambush and surprise your enemies way more effectively, and it makes the Type 64 overall way more suitable for the more skilled stat padders that also have a very good knowledge about the camo mechanics. And that's why I think the Type 64 beats the Cromwell and claims the crown of being the best stat padding tank in World of Tanks. So guys, that was all for today's top 5 videos. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, then please consider dropping a like. That would help my channel out a lot. And also, if you're new to my channel and you like these kind of videos, then don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit that bell as well, so you will stay up to date with all my future content. And at last, what do you think about this list? Do you agree, or would you have done something different? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm very curious on your opinions as well. So that only leaves me with one more thing to say, and that is, as always, have an awesome day, and I'll catch you guys later.
Jack it up.